Morning, Trainiacs. This is the first time I've been able to say this year with any sort of excitement because we have a big race coming up. The PTO World Championship that's being held at Challenge Daytona in Florida. It's happening. And even if, let's say Now, even if, let's say, the world really doesn't go well over the next few days and things have to get called back, I think they'll still hold the pro race, and that's where a huge amount of the excitement is. And the reason for that is because never before have they brought in such an elite number of athletes from Ironman, from Half Ironman, and from ITU racing who are all at the peak of their career focusing on this one race as their A race of the year. We've got Olympic medalists, we have #1 ranked athletes in the world, we have defending champions, we have athletes that have been trying to peak for this year because the amount of money going into this race is unheard of in professional triathlon. And it's exciting. So we're going to go through that race here today with what we can expect from the pros on both the men's and the women's side of the field. Now, one of the big challenges with knowing how this race is going to play out is that we haven't seen athletes perform in 2020. The odd athlete has raced here or there or done a KOM attempt, but there is nothing like racing to tell you how you're going to race. So it's a big guessing game. Did people go too hard early in the season, burn themselves out? Are they peaking? Are they injured? Are they really run fit? We don't have a clue. So I think the best way to figure out what we can expect in this race is to look back at where everyone's talent lies and just go through swim, bike, run. What can we possibly expect? Let's start with the men's side of the field. The men's side of the field is where we see a significant influence from the ITU athlete. That's where we start seeing a lot of speed really built up in the swim and the run. Because the ITU events are draft legal, we don't tend to see standout performances from cyclists. We see athletes who swim really, really well, world class, and they do this so that they can get into that front pack on the bike. And then essentially the front pack on the bike is a little bit of work. It's a little bit of tactics here and there, a little bit of jostling back and forth, but it's a group effort so that they can get onto the run with strong enough legs to execute a low 30s kind of run. In a 10K, that's ridiculous. So I think looking at this Daytona distance, which is really unique, it's 100K total. It's a 2K swim, an 80K bike, and then an 18K run. Essentially, the bike and the run are similar in proportion to the overall race as a half Ironman, but the swim is slightly more important. So I think what we're going to see is in the swim, we're going to see a lot of the ITU athletes setting the tone and gaining a lot of distance on the long course athletes. This means athletes like Alistair Brownlee, Javier Gomez, Gustav Eden, Ben Canute, Henry Schumann, Vincent Luis, and Johnny Brownlee. I think they are going to set the pace for that front pack. And what we can expect is that they will come out of the swim together. And that's where a lot of the tactics are going to lie. The long course athletes are going to be a little bit behind them. So what's going to happen? And this is what I expect to play out. And this is what Vincent Luis actually talked about on our podcast just recently. It's like the new one that's up right now. You should go check it out. He talked about this in a lot of detail, that what they expect to happen. Alistair Brownlee is one of the only athletes who is really strong swim, bike, run. And what they see is that Alistair is probably going to push really hard on the bike to try to beat up the legs of those ITU athletes who don't have years and years of riding experience with solo miles. In addition to that, the draft zone in Daytona is 20 meters. It's longer than the 7 meters for a lot of USAT triathlons and longer than even the, I believe it's 12 or 13 meters for an Ironman triathlon. So that concept of legal drafting where you save around 2 or 3 watts by staying just barely out of that draft zone and having athletes work together isn't really going to happen. In addition to that, it's hard to pass people easily on that Daytona Speedway because you've got to go up onto the bank. You don't have a lot of time to pass. So essentially, it's going to be a solo effort for most of these people. So I think what we're going to have on the bike is Alistair Brownlee setting the tone and absolutely hammering it. Of that group of super swimmers that I mentioned, I think that Ben Kanute is probably the only one that I know for sure can definitely hang in there. Of that group, I think Gustav proved last year in the Ironman World Championship that he can stay in there, and I expect him to be there. But Javier Gomez, we've seen go into races and not necessarily do a whole lot of work. And when the pace gets really fast and he has to keep up, he tends to fall off on the run. So he doesn't have that really strong bike fitness that some of these other athletes have. Vincent Luis, Johnny Brownlee, Henry Schumann. That's a big question mark. They're obviously extremely fit athletes, but do they have that depth of bike fitness to hang in there with some of the best in the world? Coming up chasing them is where it starts getting really exciting. You've got athletes like Lionel Sanders, Sebastian Kienle, even Sam Long and Cam Wurf, who are going to be able to put in more power than the majority of those super swimmers and the ITU athletes. Rudy von Berg, I also think, is a pretty good dark horse because he might not be in that front pack of the ITU swimmers, but he's probably somewhere in between those ITU swimmers and the Lionel Sanders and Sebastian Kienle. So he's not going to have as much work to do to keep up. So I think what's going to happen is we are going to see the Lionel Sanders and Sebastian Kienles and maybe even the Sam Longs and Cam Wurfs getting their way up to Alistair Brownlee in that front pack. And then the question is, how beat up is everyone's legs? Did Alistair do enough work to make the super bikers work so hard on the bike that they can't execute a good run? Are the ITU athletes fit enough on the bike so that they can execute that 30-minute 10K kind of pace in the run and then end up outrunning Alistair Brownlee? Alistair Brownlee can run 30 minutes low for a 10K. Alistair Brownlee can run close to a 3-minute kilometer. Can those super bikers? I would say they're more like a 3:20 to 3:30. Even somebody like Lionel Sanders, who's putting out 5K personal bests, that's a lot to ask over the course of 18K to race at the same pace as essentially somebody who could go from ITU triathlon onto Olympic track 10K and still do fairly well. So what I think we're going to see happen is, again, Alistair Brownlee is going to set the pace. Then, who I expect to fall off of the pace fairly quickly, just because they don't have that outright greasy fast speed, are the really strong bikers, the Sam Longs, the Cam Wurfs, the Sebastian Kienles, the Rudy von Bergs, those types of athletes. I do expect Lionel Sanders to put up a pretty good fight because he has a previous track history growing up, and he's really damn talented, and he can suffer like nobody's business. Ben Kanute has always had a tough time on the run, so while I do hear that his run fitness is always progressing and he's more run fit than he's probably ever been from the looks of things, you're still asking a lot. Even with a 10-second difference per kilometer, you're looking at 3 minutes difference on your total run split at Daytona. Johnny Brownlee has lost a little bit of his top-end run speed, and he's never been quite there with his brother. And Henry Schumann has also been a very, very talented runner, but not the peak. I think the two athletes that I'm looking at to maybe upset Alistair Brownlee are Gustav and Vincent Luis. These are two athletes that have some of the fastest run splits in ITU, and if they can get off the bike feeling a lot fresher than some of those super bikers who have had to work really hard to catch up to the group, they probably have more top-end run speed than Alistair Brownlee. I have no idea how this is all going to play out, and we're talking about such a dynamic race. I think that the podium is probably going to consist of, if I had to guess, Vincent Luis, Alistair Brownlee, and Gustav, with a dark horse of maybe an upset from Lionel Sanders. But I want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments below who you think is going to do well in Daytona. Let's get into the women's race, which is, I think, a little bit more straightforward, but also a little bit tougher to predict how it's going to play out exactly. The women's side of the field hasn't had that same influence that the men's side has had from the ITU athletes coming in and making it super fast. We've certainly seen the speed come up, but we still do see long course athletes excelling at long course as opposed to short course athletes now coming in and dominating long course like we see in the men's field. As far as the front pack with the swim goes, I think it's a very small field that's going to be able to compete with the likes of three women, being Holly Lawrence, Paula Findlay, and Lauren Brandon. These are the elite of elite swimmers that are leading the field in just about every single race that they go into. Lauren Brandon might have the edge in this longer swim kind of effort, but it is also much sharper. It's much, much more intense than the Ironman efforts that she dominates. But I think those are going to be the three women that are leading the field out of the swim. On the bike, I think Holly Lawrence of those three is probably the strongest of the group, with Paula Finley being close, but anytime they've gone head to head, there's a little bit of a gap. So I expect Holly Lawrence to pull away from that group because it is a solo effort, and I think that as long as she's fit and healthy, which has been her Achilles heel over the last several years, that she is going to be the strongest on the bike. Where the challenge is going to come for her is, I think, from a fair ways back, actually from the non-swimmers, not the middle of the pack kind of good swimmers, but the real elite bikers, being Laura Phillip and Heather Jackson. I think they are going to work really hard to get as close as they can to Holly Lawrence at the end of the bike, but I do expect Holly Lawrence to have stayed away. I don't think it's going to be like the men's field where we have as many as 10 or 12 athletes coming off the bike essentially together. I think it's going to be a little bit more like Holly Lawrence comes in with a clear lead and she has to hold off the super runners that are close. Now, if we look at that group of super runners that are going to be within, I expect, somewhere between 1 and 3 minutes back, we can look at Paula Findlay having decent run pedigree as long as she has been run fit, and it seems like she has from her YouTube channel, which, by the way, you should go check out. It's awesome. But of those athletes that are pretty close, I think Laura Phillip is probably going to be the biggest competitor that Holly Lawrence is going to have to hold off. She is extremely run talented. She's tremendously fast in short and long course racing, and if you see her training, she looks like she's quick. She's got really good foot turnover. She's a strong athlete, and I think she's probably going to put in the biggest scare into Holly Lawrence. I think some of those runners that are even a little bit further back, like Annie Haug, Sarah Crowley, Chelsea Sodaro, who are even a little bit further back but extremely talented on the run, could work themselves up close to the podium. So I will make a call on the women's side of it where I think Holly Lawrence is going to come away with it, with the best challenge coming from Laura Phillip, and I think that third podium spot could actually come from one of the athletes trying to run their way in, be it Annie Haug, Sarah Crowley, or Chelsea Sodaro. I would even put Paula Findlay in there because she has been executing better and better races as she's been able to train more and more as her injuries have become smaller and smaller issues. So that's what's up with Challenge Daytona. I think it's going to be a fantastic race. I'm sorry that we can't go there. I really want to because the people are great. The race is great. Unfortunately, we would just have to quarantine when we came back through Boxing Day, and that ain't gonna happen in our family. Now, if you want to see what it looks like at Challenge Daytona, you can check out the race coverage that we did right over here. It's gonna be a fantastic race. Good luck to all the pros and hopefully all the age groupers who are going to be attending. It's a fantastic race and a wonderful experience. So good luck, and it's gonna be hard. Suffer away, and I'm gonna have a grand old time watching it online. Later, Trainiacs.